I'm going to kind of take a different tack to this. I want to maybe use a little bit different terminology and maybe set things up in a little different way. When companies do strategic planning, when universities do strategic planning, and when countries do strategic planning, it can be a more formal or less formal process, but there's usually a differentiation between tasks that are essential and those that are important. Okay, and the classic examples are in a company that makes products, they might say the purchasing department is essential. If you don't have raw materials coming in, you've got nothing to manufacture with, and you can't make product and you're out of business. It's essential that you have a purchasing department. Okay, now, but these kinds of things don't ever make it into a vision statement or into a little paragraph that identifies what the company is really going to excel in and where they see that they're going to have a competitive advantage over their competition. See, those things that you really need to emphasize are not essential. They're important, and important is a bigger deal. Okay, so many times these companies will say, Ford, our strategy is going to be that we're going to produce the best vehicles in the world. Okay, now then when you make that statement, the rest of your activities fall into place because you know exactly where you're going to put your best people and where you'll put your resources in order to enact the vision. Well, I don't know how many of you guys have bought my manufacturing textbook. Oh, damn it, a couple in the back of the room. Well, I don't think you need to understand that manufacturing is important to the United States. It's not essential. Okay, it's important, and it's a bigger deal. Okay, so it is important for the United States for the reasons that the speakers have already mentioned. We have to excel in advanced manufacturing. We want the vision of the United States to be a country that dominates in the high tech, that has a well-educated workforce, that has a high standard of living that gets acquired from manufacturing. Okay, so I think that's an easy sell. Right? I think that when you just sit down and think about it for what did it take me? 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And you understand that's got to be the vision for our country. Now, I'll show you some boring graphs and equations and stuff because I am a professor, right? And that's what we do, right? But the good news is that ASME told me I can't have a quiz today, so there will be no exam at the end of my talk. I was the first faculty fellow that ASME sent to the Advanced Manufacturing National Program Office, and we worked on design of the NNMI program. I was the first. I beat my colleague from University of North Carolina by a week. So I have seniority. But they put together, some numbers showing that really the manufacturing sector has the largest impact in wealth generation, and it's got the good jobs. The jobs that they have spillover. They create other jobs in other sectors of the economy. There's the sayings that if a production facility opens in a town, the Walmart and the high schools will follow. But if you open up a warehouse, not so much. Right, so we know manufacturing drives other parts of the economy. Now this one, okay, here's kind of an equation, right? I want to just ask you guys to picture yourselves as being an executive at a multinational large company. And you know you have competition, and you know you have to produce good products, and you know you have to have a competitive price. Now, cost is different from price. Cost is what you have to invest in order to make something. Price is what you can demand for your product, and hopefully you can demand a higher monetary value than what the cost is. But you can see the total cost is sum of materials that go into the product, the labor that you have to pay people to make the product, the equipment you need that you can amortize over the number of parts made, the consumables that, your machine tools have little inserts that are going to be used up as you're making them. You have some parts that are bad and you throw them away, and oh man, that's expensive, right? You had problems in figuring out how you're going to make it, and how do you take something from the laboratory and scale it up and invest all that money to figure out how you're going to do it. You have development costs because you had to pay the engineers to do the design work, and you have overhead costs, lawyers, insurance companies, taxes. That's just the everything else in this equation. So An issue that comes about is really learned people say the United States should not manufacture anything anymore because that second term over their labor costs, we just can't compete with some of these countries that pay their population a couple dollars a month. But we realize that there's a whole lot of other terms, and some of these are global commodities, right? Pick a country, right? People in China aren't paying less money for petroleum than we are, or our allies are, because we're all buying it from the Saudis or from North Dakota in our case. Actually, we have a competitive advantage on energy, right? But most of these are commodities, right? So one of the really clear strategies is that there are some products where labor cost is low, and the cost to the company to produce a product just doesn't depend on labor so much. And you can still have a labor component, but it's not going to be the dominant part of the product cost. That's really what we call advanced manufacturing, high technology products. That's the stuff that it's important for us to specialize in. Now, and the problem here too is, if you look at this and you say, well, geez, this you can't read that table, it's way too small. But people look at the first column, and that's the labor rate, right? And you say, here's the United States, this is standardized, the United States is 100. Norway has much higher labor rates, 141, right? You look at China, it's about, I can't read the number, 6? You're closer, what is it? 8.6. Oh my goodness, $8.6 an hour if we're paying $100 an hour, right, if we normalize it. How can we possibly compete? But then you look at the GDP produced per hour worked, and the United States is incredibly efficient. We have incredibly productive workers because we're a technical society. We have people who love computers. You guys remember the computer scientists? Those are the guys you wouldn't date in college, right? Oh, we got computer scientists in the room. I just insulted the whole audience. I do that sometimes. So, but we have amazing productivity. So it can be the case in the United States. How do you get this high productivity? Through application of automation, robotics, through computer control of your value chain and your supply chains. We can compete, and we can compete very favorably against every country in the world if we're smart about it. People talk about productivity, and this is one that we would show off at the Advanced Manufacturing National Program Office as well. People would say, yeah, productivity is why we lose jobs. But if you look at this, from 1965 until 2000, the United States productivity increased by a factor of 6. Okay, so 600%. Huge increases in productivity. The blue line shows manufacturing employment, and it fluctuates. It goes up and down. There's periods of recession where it takes dives. But from 1965 to 2000, manufacturing employment was roughly equal, roughly fairly constant. Since 2000, nosedive. A third of our manufacturing jobs have disappeared. Okay, and the question then that has to be asked is why? It clearly must be labor rates, right? Well, no. Right? Some of these products have already been mentioned. These are products invented in the United States that are not manufactured in the United States. These are high-tech products that are produced in highly automated factories by skilled workers who enjoy a very high labor rate. Why don't we make them here? Well, think again about being this CEO. And you have a huge cost in development. You now have some professor somewhere who's got a twiffle that he's made, and you're going to make these twiffles, and you're going to figure out where are we going to make them. And you can say, well, these are going to be made in highly automated factories. Let's consider Germany. Let's consider the United States. Let's consider China. Let's consider Thailand. Let's consider everywhere. Well, the truth is that it's cheaper to scale up in other countries. And the reason was always because there's this famous graph here which shows we invest in the early stage research industry. Companies invest in the factories that make goods. But going from this prototype twiffle to a purple, shiny twiffle that we're going to make and sell is a hard process. And there are countries that are good partners who, cut the costs of that development. I just want to show a couple of things. I've got some hard numbers here about comparing Germany. Why does Germany not lose any manufacturing jobs since 2000, essentially? They lost a couple thousand, nothing really. Why do they don't lose jobs, but we do, right? And the real answer is, if you look at the investment in the manufacturing sector The manufacturing sector in the United States is pretty nice now, right? 5 years ago, it wasn't nearly this nice. We've got the NMI program that's investing about $120 million a year right now, annual since this year. Manufacturing Engineering Partnerships program is about $150 million. NSF kind of invests $50 million. That's why there's a question mark there, because they have programs that say manufacturing, but they're not always manufacturing. So, let's just say, and maybe the Department of Energy has a little bit more that's not up there, but let's just say it's around $320 million a year.
DOD.
Here's our comparison. DOD is built into NMI, right? Okay, running over. Here's what countries do. And the good news is we made it now. You see on the right there, right? So if I get rid of the big spenders, and this is scale by economy size, and we're still kind of on the low side in an area that we want to see as important. Okay, so we know the factories of the future are different than the factories today. We have to make them. We have to make sure our population wants to make them. And we have to do it because it's not essential to the country, it's important to the country. Thank you for your time.